This story is called Intimacy. For me to say that a knock at the door was unexpected would certainly be an understatement. It was, after all, 9:15 on a dark October evening, and I've long since given up any late night or even late evening activities. The porch light was off, which might have discouraged visitors even if I'd expected any. In fact, my thoughts had already projected themselves forward to warming up the mug of milk that I customarily drink while watching the 10 o'clock news on television before going to bed. I have to admit that it's long been thus ever since my beloved Alice died, now 7 years ago. Sad to say, my world has gradually closed in on me, because I'm so much less gregarious than Alice was. Truth to tell, my social life is now limited to coffee at Tim Hortons with some of my old colleagues from Environment Canada. We all got retirement packages at much the same time. I also attend Two Rivers United Church on Sundays, where I sing in the choir. Nevertheless, there it was. 9:15 or no 9:15, the door had definitely been knocked upon. I retrieved my slippers from where I'd shucked them off and walked to the front door, on the way switching on the lights, both in the hallway and on the porch. I opened the door, and there, to my surprise, was Mary Walters, a fellow chorister from Two Rivers, standing there looking somewhat uncertain. Mary sings alto to my bass in the choir, but I can hardly say that I knew her well. We chatted, of course, over coffee after choir practice and after the Sunday service. Only about this and that, nothing significant. I vaguely remembered that Mary was also widowed, but I couldn't recall any details, such as even the name of her late husband. However, there was no time to ruminate on these matters now, as the lady in question was standing on the porch of my suburban 1970s side-split home. It was Mary who took the initiative. "Hello, Owen, may I come in?" "Why, yes, of course, Mary. Is something the matter?" "No, I thought I'd just like to come over and chat." How extraordinary! Whatever would possess a woman I hardly knew to take it into her head to come over in the dark, apparently on the spur of the moment, just to chat. Had she come far? I didn't even know where she lived. For that matter, how did she know where I live? It was very strange. These thoughts flashed through my mind concurrently with conventional politeness. "Do come in. Perhaps I could take your coat." "Thank you. I'd hoped I'd find you in, but I didn't want to just call ahead." "No problem there, I can assure you. I'm in every evening." That last was all too true, I reflected ruefully. So I took Mary's coat and hung it in the tiny hall closet. "Come on in into the living room." I turned off the TV using the remote and switched on the standard lamp to make the room a little more inviting. And I picked up the newspaper from where I dropped the various sections on the floor as I finished with them. "Do sit down. Can I get you anything? Tea, perhaps?" "Oh, thank you. Yes, a cup of tea would be nice if it's no trouble." "Oh, none at all. Make yourself at home while I put the kettle on." I left her sitting on the Chesterfield and went through to the kitchen to prepare the tea. In the cupboard I found a half package of Oreo cookies to serve with the tea. Preparation of tea gave me a couple of minutes to think about the quite extraordinary situation in which I found myself. What on earth could Mary want from me? If she was in some kind of trouble, why had she chosen me as her would-be saviour? Clearly I had not resolved these dilemmas as I carried the tea tray back into the living room, where Mary was perched rather formally and uncomfortably on the edge of the Chesterfield. I placed the tray on a coffee table after displacing my library books. "Milk and sugar?" "Just a little milk, please, if I may." I poured the tea, passed Mary hers, and offered her the plate of Oreo cookies. "Thank you, just one," as she took it. We sat in a rather strained silence for a few moments, avoiding further interaction by sipping our tea. Finally, Mary said, "You must be wondering why I'm here." "Well, yes, it did occur to me. It's like this, and I hope you don't mind. I find the evenings are very lonely. I just wanted some company, someone to chat to." "Why me?" I thought, but I kept my mouth shut. Well, it's been 5 years next month since Arnold died. Most of my friends are still married and they really don't want a fifth wheel at their evening get-togethers. Lack of conversation gets frustrating by myself, and I don't find much that I want to watch on TV. And my library books, it's true. You can't just read novels all the time, can you? A response seemed to be required, so I nodded. I hope you don't mind, she continued. I spoke to Florence, the organist, and asked her if she knew you. She said that you were widowed. I knew that already, and your wife had died some years ago. I noticed that you sometimes have scientific magazines sticking out of your coat pocket when you come to choir practice. I wondered if you might be a conversationalist. I hope I'm not being intrusive, and maybe if you'd like some company in the evening. Last was put as a question. Well, I really hadn't thought about it, I replied, although deep down I have thought about this over and over again on lonely evenings in front of the television, but I could hardly say so just like that to a woman who was almost a stranger. I surprised myself by adding, but it sounds like a nice idea. I noticed that Mary has a very pleasant speaking voice, the kind that would be easy to listen to, not like that Kathleen in the soprano section with a voice that cuts the air like a buzzsaw. I don't think I could stand an evening of conversation with her. How did you know where I lived? Mary chuckled slightly. That was easy, I just used the parish list. She had a melodious laugh I also detected. Nevertheless, our conversation was still at the stage of a car engine sputtering on a cold winter's day upon turning the ignition key, but gradually it coughed itself into life, mainly as a result of Mary's efforts. What had brought the two of us together, or more accurately what had brought Mary to my home, was our similar circumstance of widowhood, and it was there that our relationship began. It turned out that coincidentally neither of us had ever had children, which accounted for much of our loneliness when we were left widows. After 7 years in my case and 5 years in Mary's, the intense sudden pains caused by the piercing arrows of grief were behind us both. Though the heartache never goes away entirely, but we were able to reminisce about the past, about the years before we'd met each other. To my surprise, I even found myself able to open up about my life with Alice. We'd both been environmental activists in the day when government scientists were still allowed to have opinions on environmental matters. Back in the day, we'd even gone out to Clayoquot Sound in western British Columbia, being part of the peaceful protests and sit-ins against the giant logging company Macmillan Bloedel. We'd been part of a group that had thwarted their plans to clear-cut Mears Island, part of the temperate rainforest, and home for generations to First Nations communities. I told Mary with a bit of a smile about Alice's indignation at the proposed destruction of this pristine forest, and how my flamboyant wife had padlocked herself to the entrance to one of the logging roads, until she was forcibly removed to spend a night, although out of the rain unlike me, in the cells of the RCMP detachment. For her part, Mary told me about her career as an elementary school teacher. She loved the children, grade 1 was her specialty, and a precious few still came to visit her. How she enjoyed hearing about their achievements in life, their marriages and their children, and in some cases these days, their grandchildren too. She admitted to a sense of pride that they remembered her enthusiasm for teaching and her love of them as students. Arnold had been in the administration of the same school board, leaving them both with significant time to spend together in the summers. In their early days, they had backpacked to remote destinations, long before the tourists and the tour companies discovered them. She told me, for example, about their trip to South America and their train journey from Antofagasta to La Paz in Bolivia, a mixed train of freight and passengers that wound its way through the Andes on narrow gauge tracks, with terrifyingly sheer precipices only feet from the rails. And she added with a laugh about the fish processing industry that so dominated Antofagasta that even the fried chicken tasted fishy because the birds were fed on fish meal. 10 o'clock came and went, and 10:30. By 11, Mary noticed the time, declared it was well past her normal bedtime and time to go home. Due to the lateness of the hour, I insisted on driving her. We both realized just how enjoyable the evening had been, and so our affirmations that we must do this again were heartfelt and not merely the kind of politeness that one has no intention of following up. And so a friendship developed between us and then deepened. We met for conversation. The very process of talking together brought back long-forgotten memories for both of us. We began to feel comfortable enough with each other we could share our most private memories from long ago. I told Mary how I first met Alice. We'd both been to a protest against the construction of the Spadina Expressway in Toronto. I admitted to Mary that even then I'd been a rather shy and retiring person, and how surprised I was that the outgoing Alice agreed to have coffee with me after the placards had been handed back to the organisers. I was even more amazed that she continued to go out with me. Truth to tell, Alice had taken the initiative at most stages of our romance, I told her with a touch of embarrassment, from begging me to setting the date for our wedding. I never did know what she saw in me, I told Mary, with a bit of a laugh mixed with wonderment. But we stayed married, just like the words of the marriage vow, for better for worse, in sickness and in health, till death us do part. It was the energetic Alice who succumbed first to the passage of time, I told Mary. She was only 56 when she had a major stroke. I guess I just had to pick up the slack. What I really meant was that the rubber had hit the road about those marriage vows. The package from Environment Canada had come just months before, so I was able to stay home and care for Alice. Although she regained much of her strength in the right leg, she continued to walk with a severe limp, and she never recovered the ability to speak. Fortunately, I said, I'd never been one of those husbands who didn't do anything around the house. But I had to admit that taking over complete responsibility for cooking, shopping and domestic chores, as well as looking after a depressed spouse, had been much harder than having a full-time job with the government. After 3 difficult years, Alice had another stroke, and this one was fatal. Mary's life with Arnold had been quite different. They'd met socially at a number of school board functions. Arnold Hines, dark-haired and good-looking, found himself dancing with Mary Walters at a Christmas party. She was a natural dance partner. Their relationship was based at first on their enjoyment of dancing. Ballroom dancing, line dancing, square dancing. If it could be danced, they danced it. When they backpacked to exotic locales, Mary and Arnold fell in easily with the local dances. And from their South American adventures, they had learned to perform a really wicked tango, she confided. Mary related with a smile that she had insisted on keeping her own name after marriage, and I was not surprised at such a decision in those days by this vivacious and self-assured woman. Of course, these days it's considered quite normal. Arnold and Mary had planned to continue their travels in retirement, though much more comfortably than backpacking given their time of life and more affluent circumstances. But it was not to be. The path to Mary's widowhood lay along the road of cancer, lung cancer, even though Arnold had never smoked. We both wondered whether the asbestos insulation at the school board office might have been a contributing factor, she said. Not that it made any difference. Like you, I found myself responsible for the care of an invalid, who weakened and shriveled from 180 to just over 100 pounds over the course of 3 years. When Arnold finally died, I was half devastated by the loss and half happy that he no longer suffered, she went on, wiping tears from her eyes. It was terrible to watch him just withering away like an autumn leaf and in such pain. Even morphine didn't control the pain properly. I was so angry with the doctor who would not prescribe more. He was one of those old school idiots who worried that Arnold might get addicted. We went out to dinner at restaurants. I've also always enjoyed good food and different food, and was delighted to find that Mary did also. So we ate at Indian, Spanish, Ethiopian, Italian restaurants, you name it, we ate it. Fridays were our usual evenings for dinners out, except of course when there was something else on. We went to plays staged by the local dramatic society, and because we are both members of the Two Rivers Choir, it's not surprising we both have an interest in music. So we attended in concerts together, and on one occasion the ballet. Several months after our first unconventional meeting, we were part of a mass choir at a gala concert During the annual national meeting of the Royal Canadian College of Organists, there were hymns and other choral selections, accompanied by well-known organists and conducted by major choir directors from across the country. There was a party afterwards for all the adrenaline-boosted performers, and it was past 11 o'clock when the party broke up. By the time we drove into the parking lot of Mary's apartment, it was past 1 a.m. I might be considered a little old-fashioned, but I always walk around the car to open the passenger door for a lady, and I did so on this occasion. As she got out, Mary said, "Owen, there's something I want to ask you. I hope you'll not think it's inappropriate or be offended. It's nearly 6 years since I had a man in my bed. I would really like you to come in and spend the night with me, just to lie with me and hold me. Would you mind very much?" "I don't have anything with me," I responded, feeling awkward, yet with something of a sense of déjà vu. "No toothbrush, no pajamas, no nothing." "Oh, I don't see that as a problem," replied Mary. "I never sleep in nightclothes, and my dentist always gives me those free toothbrushes whenever I see her. So will you come in?" So, somewhat embarrassed and a little uncertain, I went up to Mary's apartment. After all, we're not 25 years old in the bloom of youth. Nevertheless, a little while later, two quite elderly people, one male and the other female, lay naked together in Mary's queen-size bed. One was tall and rangy. I discovered the other was nicely plump, though not fat. We had both been rather self-conscious as we manoeuvred ourselves into this position. Mary had taken a dressing gown into the bathroom. I took the opportunity to remove my clothes and get into bed while Mary absented herself. Mary reappeared modestly clad in the dressing gown and removed it, with her back to the bed, before climbing in. I could hardly stare at her, so I turned my back as she divested herself of her gown. Moments passed as we each wondered what would happen next. Mary turned off the light. She turned to me and stroked my chest. "You feel so good. It's been so long since I cuddled a man I'd almost forgotten how good it feels." And after a while, she wished me good night. Mary turned away so that we both faced the same direction, and I put my arm around her. Automatically, it seemed, my right hand cupped her left breast. It was larger and softer than I remembered Alice's small high breasts, but comfortable and comforting nonetheless. Without conscious thought or intent, I began to stroke the nipple gently with my thumb. That feels nice," Mary murmured contentedly, and we lay like that until we fell asleep.